Okay, thank you. Recording in progress. And I thank you all for being up and available at 8:30 this morning. And we have a wonderful speaker, Isabel Tom, who's going to be talking about the value of wrinkles. This is a book she wrote regarding her parents. Um, I turn it over to hear our bio.
Great. So, as Meryl said, we have Isabel Tom, who is the author of The Value of Wrinkles, a young perspective on how loving the old will change your life. She's been featured on numerous radio shows and podcasts, including Building Relationships with Dr. Gary Chapman and AARP's Take On Today. She's also a wife, a mom, a daughter, and forever grandchild who is passionate about serving the older adult population. Between growing up in an intergenerational household and working in the field of aging, Isabel has over 35 years of experience with older adults. Her grandparents, Mama and Yi, who lived until 98 and 102, had a profound impact on her life. Professionally, she has over 13 years experience working at reputable healthcare organizations in the senior living and hospice care field. She holds a master's in public health from the University of Maryland at College Park, and she's married to her husband, Kevin, and they're blessed with 3 little ones who keep life fun. You can learn more about her and her book at isabeltom.com. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Isabel.
Hi, everyone. So every time somebody reads my bio, I'm like, is that me? So thank you for having me today. Thank you, Erin, Joe, Gary, and Meryl, especially for just coordinating this. I mentioned earlier that I just got my kids out of the door. And so that's actually my life most days. I am not any hotshot speaker or author. Sometimes I can't believe that I actually wrote a book. So I kind of have to slap myself a couple of times just to be like, that's your story. So I hope just to keep today just kind of casual, informal. So if you have questions, please, please, please put them in the chat or, open your mic and feel free to ask me. It doesn't seem like it's a huge group. And even though I have done podcasts and radio interviews, I get nervous every single time. So just thank you for having me. And I just hope that my story encourages you. And I guess I'll start by saying I really enjoy being in this place because I have not done networking with the senior care professionals in a long, long time. And I used to, one of my previous jobs was at Riderwood as community outreach coordinator. So I did that and I had no idea it had to do with networking. I had to network every single week. And so I was attending a lot of these types of meetings. I don't think your group was created till later on, but I would probably be the quiet person in the corner. And, but one of the things about working in senior care, besides the fact that I really love the older generation and have come to appreciate them, is I love the professionals that I have met because I, both in being a professional, but also taking it in from the personal side and caring for my grandparents and my parents. I appreciate people like you because I feel like this field is just full of really compassionate and really caring people. So thank you for what you do. And I know what you have done throughout this past year, especially has meant a ton and a lot. So I hope that you keep on doing what you're doing. And while I'm at home, just trying to make sure my kids get their backpacks and their glasses at school, it encourages me that there are people like you who are just doing what I try to do on my, off times. Is I just want people to value the older generation more. So really, thank you so much for what you're doing. Can you put in the chat, by the way, where you all are from, what area you're from? I know a bunch of you are from Rockville, but what city are you checking in from? Maryland. Okay. I was going to say, I didn't think this reached Maine. So I saw Washington, D.C. Okay. Awesome. Annapolis, Rockville. Very awesome. Okay. So you can keep putting that in the chat and I'd love to see. I think what's really special too is that you guys are from where I'm from. So I'm from Rockville, and really like this book, The Value of Wrinkles, pretty much started in your neck of the woods. So for me, what is different about my story, and I think a lot of people who work in the senior care field can relate to it, but I think for me, what's kind of unique is, for example, caregiving came before parenting for me. So a lot of times I have related to maybe people who are like my mom's age more, because I took part in caring for my grandparents. So basically, when I was born, I'm the youngest of three. It was my parents, my two older sisters, and then my grandparents already lived with me. So mama and yaya is grandma and grandpa. It's paternal grandma and paternal grandpa in Cantonese. So I'm Chinese. And my dad is the oldest son in the family, or was the oldest son in the family. And so just Chinese culture, especially because he grew up in Hong Kong, was born in China. It's kind of expected that the eldest son is the one who takes care of his parents. So my grandparents moved over here and ended up living with my parents. So when I was born, there were 68 and 71. So I like to say that like I basically aged with my grandparents, and when they passed, they were 98 and 102. So if any of you have read my book or seen my book, even on the cover, it was really special. That's my grandma. They drew a picture of my grandma and my grandpa on the back. And I think with my story, part of the whole caregiving experience is that I wasn't a caregiver when I was a baby and I was born. But when I look back on my story, I see that even when I was a baby, like 6 months old, I actually still played a part in blessing, and I had a relationship with my grandparents. So especially once I started working professionally in the senior care field, that is pretty much where I would say where I had a turning point in my journey. So a lot of times I brought a picture to show you guys. This is an older picture of my family. My grandparents, there's a glare, but my grandparents are in the middle there. My husband and I are there before we even had kids. So like I said, caregiving came before parenting. My kids right now are soon to be 5, 7, and 9. But when I was working in the senior care field, I think over the span of about 10 years, I experienced the birth of 3 children, so 3 beautiful, really energetic, really chatty children. But I also experienced the death of 3 of my loved ones. And 3 people who were very close to me. So my grandpa, Yaya, passed away at 98. My dad, who was their son, passed away at 69. And my grandma passed away at 102. So as a mom who's like always really busy, sometimes I stop and as I share my story, it's kind of like a grief thing too. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this maybe personally, but also professionally, because you work with older adults and you watch, your clients, your residents, they become your friends and they decline too. So this journey of learning to appreciate older adults has just been life-changing, obviously, for me, enough that I would write a book about it. And when basically the inspiration for this book is when my grandma passed, I was almost 35, and I looked back, and even though when I was younger, I had complained and like resented the fact that I grew up living with my grandparents, I look back and I was like, I was so blessed that I had 35 years with my grandma. I had 26 years with my grandpa, and then I took part in caring for my dad as well. But I look back and I was like, I was so blessed. And there were things that I learned in working in the senior care field that I felt like people needed to know. And I just wanted people to be able to, especially a younger generation, to be able to not miss out on that relationship with the older adult population, whether you have grandparents or not. So this was the first, I decided to write this book really because when my grandma passed away, I realized there are no books out there that are written to the younger generation about aging. And that's completely fair, because like, how can somebody, who's younger even know what older people are experiencing? But for me, when I looked back and reflected on my life, I realized I lived in the same house with my grandparents for 26 years. And, even though I would be going to work and working with older adults, I came home and I realized I had a 24-hour gig with my grandparents for so long that I kind of just like soaked it all in, but I never expressed it through writing or anything like that. But I learned what aging was like, at least for my grandparents, just by watching, just by observing, just by, I was there, had a room right next to them. So I would wake up to them shuffling to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and that increased over time. There are times where I would hear, my grandpa was born in 1912 and he went through a lot. And there are times I woke up and heard him wailing and saying he wanted to die. And I think these are like realities that that seniors deal with, but I guess I experienced it at a very young age. And because I worked in the senior care field, I was able to be educated and learn how to understand what my grandparents were going through. So just to give you a little bit of my professional background, I graduated. I have a chapter in my book about this. I think it's called First Encounters. I graduated with a business degree, and I thought I was gonna try to go into marketing. I remember I had a friend who got to help like be in a marketing team where they marketed like Heinz ketchup. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I said, I want to do something like that. I want to be with one of those brand names, Coca-Cola or whatever. But when I was about to graduate, my mom was like, you need a job. And I ended up getting connected with a nursing home administrator who was a parent of my classmate. And he happened to hear me say that I was thinking of either working with kids or working with seniors, because I had experience with my grandparents, but I also like kids. And so he came to talk to me and he said, there is a huge need for good nursing home administrators. And I had no idea what a nursing home administrator was. I really thought the only job would be to be a nurse and changing bedpans. So my initial thought was like, no, that is not for me. I'm not going to be a nurse. But he kind of opened my eyes to the different types of jobs that could be out there. And he actually introduced me and referred me to Erickson Living, because he wasn't from this area. So at the time, Erickson Living, which many of you may be familiar with, like Riderwood and Oak Crest and all those communities, they were just starting this program. So I call this like divine intervention. They were just starting this program to try and get young professionals in the field. And so I had a business degree and I really didn't know what I was doing, but I just needed a job. And so they offered me a job. So I was one of the first 5 operations associates and they had this in the corporate office, which meant I rotated to different communities and just learned about the field and then got placed after that. So that, I don't even know if they still have that around, but like, that's a really good job to be able to experience different parts of senior care and get to know what you like, and to be mentored by some really great leaders in the field. So literally probably the first 3 days, I was like, wow, this is not what I expected. And I just love the community feel of Erickson Living and what they had. And I learned so much. So I think that was kind of like my turning point where I was like, I think this is not what I think it's going to be. I did that for a year, and then I got my first placement or permanent job at Riderwood as a wellness coordinator. So I did senior fitness, chair aerobics, health fairs. I coordinated different educational programs, and I love fitness. I have coached, I still coach for field hockey and things like that. So I love sports. But this was those 2 years that I worked in senior fitness, that's when I got to really connect with older adults more. I think one of the things that I realized is that for a lot of younger people, their perception of older adults is often inaccurate because we get those perceptions from whether you have grandparents, and if you have like 4 grandparents or 2 grandparents or 1 grandparent, like your entire perception of the older adult population is based on those 2 people that you know. And even though I grew up living with my grandparents, I realized I didn't know what the older people were like. I only knew what these 2 people were like, right? And all of you work with clients, you work with so many seniors, you know that they are all different. They're completely different. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me, a really educational experience for me. And that is where I developed a lot of friendships with residents who some of them I still keep in touch with. A number of them have passed. A number of them I interviewed for this, in this book. Throughout The Value of Wrinkles, I decided I wanted to really share the actual voice of older people. And so I interviewed a number of older adults and got quotes from them. It was hard though, you guys all understand this, because even as I was writing it, I probably had at least four residents who I really love pass away. And that was special that I got to that I was able to record them and just have a piece of them in that. So I could probably keep on talking forever. So let me just check the time so that I guess what really inspired me to write this book too is that I didn't see a guide out there I saw a lot of books about caregiving. I saw a lot of books about aging, but they're written by people who are like my mom's age or older. And because of my experiences, every time I look in the eyes of an older person, a lot of times I would catch this look of either fear or just like not confidence, and when I was at Riderwood working as a wellness coordinator, I was in the fitness center. So residents would come there first because they wanted to go to the most liveliest place in the community. They did not want to be with other seniors. A lot of times they would say, all the people here are so old. And so they would come to the fitness center just to feel, I think, younger. I think they wanted to stay active and healthy. But in working in that fitness center, I saw residents fall, and you could see the look on their faces of that defeat, and almost feeling like if they started using a walker, like that was like a failure to them, right? I experienced them when they lost a spouse, and to hear those things, and they became my friends, I just started becoming a lot more empathetic and understanding to what they were experiencing. So let's just fast forward. I then moved on to community outreach at Arbor Ridge, which was then called Renaissance Gardens. And that's when I had the chance to do some networking and visit like different communities out in Montgomery County and just meet a lot of other people like all of you who are just really amazing and who are just so experienced and who taught me so much. So a lot of what I have learned, most of it is from colleagues like you all who have just been gracious enough to share your experiences with somebody who is younger like me. And so there I was helping with assisted living and short-term rehab. And then in networking, I got connected to somebody from Montgomery Hospice, and they offered me a job. And I said, no, I don't want to work in the hospice care field. That has to do with dying. That's a little too much for me. I was 27 and I already had a hard time explaining to my peers, like, why I was working in this field with older adults. They would always say, isn't that so sad? And I would try to explain to them, like, I really enjoy this. It's actually fun. It's life-giving. And then my mom, after I rejected that offer and said, like, no, thank you, my mom was like, I think you should really consider it. It's good to learn different things. And so, like, oh, bye. So I kind of begrudgingly was like, okay, I will take this job. So I worked at Montgomery Hospice for about 8.5 years and was the program manager of the Montgomery Hospice Center for Learning, helped them start that. And actually, I will say that that was my favorite time, is working in end of life care, because I learned so much that I really feel, if you don't understand end of life care, then I think it's really hard to understand older adults. And that's just a service that I think that really benefits older adults, and especially caregivers. So I think one of the things with my story is that as I was going through all the professional, changing jobs and things like that, basically I started with the healthiest and then ended up working with the most frail and people near the end of life. But that's how it matched up in my personal life too. So when I was working in senior fitness, my grandpa, he walked an hour and 15 minutes every single day up till age 97. He would be out in the neighborhood and people would be like, are you sure he's okay? But he would go out there slow and steady, hour, 15 minutes, super healthy. And then when I worked in short-term rehab and assisted living, my grandpa had his first stroke. The type of relationship I had with my grandparents was very close, sometimes too close. If you all are caregivers, maybe you understand this, but as a grandchild, I didn't take part in the paperwork with my grandparents, but they started to depend on me a lot emotionally. They did not want to burden my parents. So when they could, they would depend on me and they would ask me for things. So that was very stressful. It's not easy. But I learned to see that I could bless them just in being what I call like a mood booster. And that, I think, is one thing that helped them to live a full and good quality of life near their end years. So that's a lot. I can go on and on and on. But that's most, I would say that's part of my journey. That relationship that I had with my grandparents is something that I'm really thankful for. When my grandma passed, I like to say that she was one of my best girlfriends, the oldest one, of course. She was over 100. And I can see now, one of the things that I try to do is a lot of work in trying to help people to see the value of intergenerational relationships in the community, but also in the family, because I think a lot of times grandchildren don't know what to do. They're not the primary caregivers. So they're like, I have no role here. I don't need to do anything. And I realized that, first of all, parents can use a lot of help. And if the grandchildren are involved, that can like emotionally help a whole lot. But not only that, there's value both ways. I like to say that seniors are not service projects. And I want people to see that there's value that you get back. You guys know this, like when you work in the senior care field, you realize that you are blessed in return. There's always like that senior that you serve that really encourages you. And so I want people to see that. So I could go on, and I have written like tons of notes next to me, but I think you guys said that you have like a Q&A time. So maybe, I think maybe that's the direction we could take. I think first, my book, if you haven't read it, it's available like at all bookstores. And if you ever wanted like a signed copy, then contact me and I can arrange to sign a copy. It's also, if you're in Montgomery County, I think there's about like over 10 copies at Montgomery County Public Libraries. So that's just one way. It's also an Audible. And I will say that even though it's targeted towards, I would say, people who are like in their first half of life, I've actually found, and I'm really grateful that I found a lot of older adults who really appreciate it. And I think it sounds like the things that I've written like serve as a voice for them. So I had like a grandma order like 15 copies for all of her grandchildren because she wanted them to read it. In about 2 weeks, I'll be going to Riderwood, a book club. The residents, they invited me to come. So even if you have like a client who just needs a bump of encouragement, like please share it with them. And I like the title. I came up with the title. I like the title because I think even if you don't like to read or don't read at all, that title like speaks for itself, like the value of wrinkles. And so that's really what I hope people get from the book, even if they don't read it. I will say that the last 3 chapters are my favorite. So if you
Isabel?
get there. Yep, sure. Hi, Joe.
So, as one of your readers, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, um, in the book, you relate a lot of wonderfully insightful experiences and thoughts and suggestions, but you also give us a lot of humor. And I'd like to know if you can share with us a couple of what you believe to be the most humorous events that you have been able to experience in the senior care world.
Okay, I feel like if you work day to day with older adults, there's always something funny. So I'm trying to think like, what are the funniest experiences that I'm allowed to share too?
Well, you don't have to use anyone's name.
Okay.
Okay.
There was one that I had that I loved hearing like love stories from the residents and just meeting both pairs. There was one resident that I really came to love because she came in, she had early onset Alzheimer's at first, but her husband was just like the nicest guy ever. But she was hilarious because I remember telling her, I love your new haircut, because a lot of the residents would get their haircut in the salon next door, then come in to do a little exercise. And I remember saying, I love your haircut. And she like she goes, it's a wig. And she moved it. And she did that with her teeth too. So that I remember just instances like that, where I think because I wasn't a social worker, it wasn't like a formal situation that I got to interact with a lot of these residents, that I got to experience things like that. With my grandparents, my grandma hated washing her hair. I don't know if, depending on what area that you guys work in, she hated washing her hair. And when I would go over, this was like when I was a mom of young kids, I would go over to my sister's house, which is kind of confusing, but my oldest sister is like the champ in this story. My parents, they were very stressed out after living with my grandparents for about over 30 years. And so my sister, a mom of young kids, invited my grandparents to live with her. So she was a caregiver, mom of 4, and a primary caregiver for my grandparents for 13 years. But I came over often, was the one in charge of washing my grandma's hair. And it was so funny. I would ask my grandma, I'd be like, when was the last time you washed your hair? And I remember she said something one time like, your mom just washed it yesterday. And then when I called my mom and asked her, my mom was like, no, I didn't. I haven't washed her hair in a long time. And my grandma in Chinese was like, shucks, I got caught again. So I would constantly try to do things like that. But we had that type of relationship where we could do that. So I was really blessed by that. Let me see.
I'd like to share a little story.
Sure.
I have a client that lives, ironically, in Riderwood, 97 and 93 years old. He went to Japan to live. Unfortunately, he wound up getting divorced there, and he met a woman there, and their birth date is the same day. They're 4 years apart, but they both have April 20th as their birthday. And how often does something like that happen? I will tell you, I also had the experience of one of my father's friends from childhood, from Brooklyn, lived down here, and I used to go over and visit him every couple of weeks. And he would tell me a few childhood stories that happened over with he and my father, and it would just bring me to tears. And I'm really relating to everything that you're going through, whether it's with a client or whether it's with my own family. As I said, I had 4 great grandparents still alive when I was born, with the last one dying when I was 18 years old. No, I never got involved with paperwork or anything, but I remember them vividly and the stories they had to tell, and giving them the chance to talk and tell about their life history is everything needs to be written down. And unfortunately, we've all been leading lives where that doesn't happen. So I really want to thank you for what you're doing, because you're bringing a lot of knowledge to people in the forefront. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I like to do is I love to speak to groups, just like everyday people groups. So I've gone to like before COVID, I've gone to like my daughter's school. And when she was in 1st grade, I would tell those kids, like, you need to know that you have a superpower, because I really feel like the younger that you are, that through really simple gestures, and even for myself, when I started out, I was like 21, I saw that the residents liked me more because I was younger. And there was just something about that relationship that I felt like was really special. And I want to help children, teenagers, young adults to see how valuable they are, that they can play a role in simply like when they say hello, encouraging an older person. And that's not something that they have to go overseas to do. These are things they can do in their own neighborhood to make a huge difference. And I was going to share a funny story. As my daughter is, well, now she's 9, but when she turned 6, she said she wanted to move into Riderwood, because she had gone there with me, because she said, well, I'm 65. I just turned 6 and I was 5. So I can move there. So I have tried to bring my kids with me, even though sometimes it stresses me out, because I feel like they can throw tantrums and cry. My grandma was in a nursing home for the last month of her life, and I would just bring all 3 of them. It was like a crazy circus, and just people would like stare at them and wave at them, and just, it was like the highlight of their day. So I really encourage, especially young parents, to just, I don't want to say like use their kids, but yes, teach your kids that their kids have this special ability, special superpower, just to do so much. So I love being able to talk to groups of younger people and also parents, because I feel like parents, I think a lot of in our communities, we value the older generation. I think a lot of times it's that we don't know how to value them. We don't know what to say. It feels awkward and we don't know how to connect. So I kind of like went back. If I ever write another book, it will be about helping parents, or like helping kids to appreciate and understand and value the older generation, because I look back on my professional career and I asked myself, this was like during COVID, why did I stay in the field? Like I could have gone somewhere else, and I really thought I was going to do that. But I realized that had to do with, I have like a 3-prong approach, is that I realized that I had impact. I started understanding, people were like educating me about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and I was learning about it. And it was interesting to me. And so I was less afraid, like if I saw somebody with an oxygen tube, I wasn't fearful after I found out why and learned more about it. And then I say the 3rd one is prompt. And as whether you are like a mentor in the senior care field or a parent, I think our job is to prompt and help connect the 2 generations. So I've seen that in my own life. Yeah, so.
Isabel?
Yes.
I'd like to add too,
Sure.
you talk about the younger generation, the children, but I see in so many situations where you've got family members in the 30s and 40s who don't make the attempt to do what you are doing, not only yourself, because you were in the environment, but with your children. They just don't do it. They have this woe is me attitude that their life is so overwhelming that they can't deal with anything else but what's in front of them.
So yeah, I completely understand that because I'm always overwhelmed. And but one of the things that I try to share with people who are my own age, and so I hope to go to like a lot more mom groups and things like that, is that if you are in that sandwich generation, it actually helps you. So my son tells me he's bored every day. He's 4 and he wants me to play checkers with him like all day long. And so if I have his grandma come and play checkers, like connecting those generations, if you do that groundwork, it actually makes it easier for those of us who are in the middle and who are like running around like crazy chickens, because my mother-in-law or my mom really loves that time where they can engage with my kids, and they want meaningful things to do. And sometimes they don't know what to do because my kids are running around and, like, so sometimes like as that connector, if we can connect them together and get them to relate in certain ways, I think that's powerful. And that's one of the reasons why I want more grandchildren or just younger, whether it's like a neighbor, to get involved, because I think even just as a whole, like at a bigger level, I think that's what we need in our communities. If you see what young people are dealing with, they're dealing with isolation too. And they are from a digital age where their default is digital. They don't have relationships that are real in person. And so, but they're craving it. I think they really are. And so when you give them that experience with somebody who's older, what has happened for me is having older friends and having my grandparents there. I didn't realize it, but it built my confidence. I didn't have that that temptation to compare, because I couldn't compare myself with that 85-year-old resident, right? I wasn't going into this relationship and saying, oh, I wonder if like my hair looks okay, or if she's going to think my dress is okay, or like it's not from this brand name store. I didn't have any of that. And so it became a relationship where they started to appreciate me just because of my presence. I didn't have to come with good grades to impress them. I didn't even have to speak well. I feel like being around, like I have learned my social skills a lot from being around older adults, because it was a very gracious place where they were just happy to see me. And they were like, I could mess up the conversation or really have nothing right to say, and they would just laugh at me and be like, it's great to see you. So I really, even with my kids, I like it when they are talking with our older neighbors, and I will guide them and say, you will say, you say, hi, Mrs. Young, how's your day? And the older people in our communities, they're the perfect people to practice on, because they're going to be gracious. They're not going to speak, talk back and say like, why did you say that so funny? They're going to say, thank you so much. Like, thanks for saying, it was so great to see you. So I've seen that so many times.
And Isabel, another thing I think that right in line with what you've been describing, children have such a wonderful abundance of energy. And when you were talking about a superpower, that's probably one of the superpowers that kids have. It's the energy that it seems to be endless, and imagination, creativity. They're not stuck in any particular format of what to say, how to say it, what to do. They just generate just fun. And that's what a lot of seniors need, is just a little more fun in their lives.
Yeah, I think it's that authenticity. And I think that's why I think sometimes parents worry so much, like, oh, I can't bring my kids to be around seniors because they're going to be so rude. But it's refreshing, I think. My daughter, my mom, so my dad passed away, so my mom is single now. And my daughter's the only one who's brought up, are you going to get married again? And we're all like, don't mention that. But she just does it carefree. And my mom just started cracking up laughing. She's just like bringing up all the taboo topics. And it's, you can tell it's very refreshing for my mom to hear that. nobody probably has ever mentioned that. Everything from like, your haircut looks, why does it look so funny today? And I think in normal circumstances that would be, I have to teach her that that's not appropriate, but I think that even that can be a gift. So I have a new podcast. It's called the Value of Wrinkles podcast. And one of the last episodes I did, I'm going through the 5 love languages and how we can use it to bless older adults. And one of the things I wrote is words of affirmation. That's one of the 5 love languages. And I think for our older, a lot of older people, they don't even get a lot of words. So forget the words of affirmation. They don't even get a lot of people who talk to them in conversation. So starting with just connecting, getting people to connect with an older person and seeing their value, like that's really what my goal is, to help people to see a different perspective, is the first step. And then building onto that and learning how to have words of affirmation. But I think speaking words, whether it's nice to see you this evening, that is a word of affirmation because it's a word of acknowledgement. And a lot of times the older generation I've seen, they're just not acknowledged. We just kind of walk by them. We forget about them, and we forget how much they not just wisdom, but experience, expertise, and that they have such a story, so I think they also have much more interesting stories to tell, because for people who are younger, like I remember hearing residents talk about, tell me that they built their own house from like a Better Homes and Gardens magazine, and that was so cool to me, so I think it's about kind of setting people up to connect in that way. So,
well, I think they struggled in many different ways that today's generation does not struggle in. A lot of things are handed to them, and that also can be very problematic.
So yeah, I think sometimes I've seen and I know that sometimes parents who are already stressed out with young kids, sometimes they get stressed out because, let's say it's their parent, kind of like judges and says, oh, this younger generation doesn't know how to do this, and it can become more stressful, right? So I think that's why it's so important to be that connector and to kind of speak well of both generations in good ways when you're not around them, to help gain an appreciation. So with all this talk about racism and everything, I mean, I feel like in connecting the young and the old, what we're teaching our kids is how to relate to people who are different than them. And so that is important for culture. If you're trying to help children to understand different cultures and appreciate different cultures, I think this is a great place to start, because there's that graciousness too. But I think that's such an important skill that, I want my kids to learn, is just to learn how to relate and appreciate different people. And if they're with people who are exactly like them and not different ages too, then they're not going to gain that skill or gain that appreciation for others. So when they learn how to connect with, whether it's their grandparents or older neighbors and friends, they don't have to be best friends, but it just gives them a different perspective that helps them, whether it's social skills anywhere, throughout their life. So I think it's really important.
I wonder how many of the folks that are on this Hollywood Squares panel this morning have read the book. Am I the only one?
It's okay if
I just
haven't.
bought it. Does that count?
I have not, but I plan to.
Well, I would encourage all of you to read it, enjoy it, because it's a delightful journey along with Isabel and her family through the sometimes wonderful world and sometimes challenging world of those of us who are seniors. Look, we're some of you are very young. Some of us are not very young. And so we have experienced some of the stuff that Isabel describes. but the insights that Isabel's book gives us, I think, are very valuable. And frankly, I encourage everyone to read it. Isabel, I have a question. Were you able to take pictures of a lot of the folks that you've been able to interact with? Photographs?
So I did take pictures with some of them, but the difficulty in writing is that you always have to have people sign a form to give permission for you to share their story. And so a number of them, I've either changed their names, and a number of them have passed already. So even it's actually very difficult when I got later on into the book, when I was turning in my final edits, that day I found out that one of my residents, that he passed away, because when I had emailed him, his son emailed me back and said that he had passed. And so I asked his kids for permission. So I have some pictures. My favorite one is of one of my favorite residents that I knew like 17 years ago, 15 years ago. And she was 103 when she passed, and she was clipping coupons at 103 to send to military families. I mean, just like so inspirational, so amazing. So I love to share stories like that. I want to also share that I know all of you are small businesses, and I am small too. I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so if you ever want to connect and you think that my story can help you, like can encourage your audience, the people that you're trying to reach out to, like I am local. And if I have the time, I'm happy to do that, whether it's like a book signing or sharing or a video. I'm trying to for Grandparents' Day coming up in September. Because of COVID, there's no Grandparents' Day. And so I'm trying to see if I can get this to be through Montgomery County Public Schools or different schools in the area, to see if I can somehow create another video. I did one last year for Grandparents' Day to get sent to all the grandparents in the county or anywhere actually. So if you have connections to a school, please let me know. My husband works for MCPS, but that's something that I spoke to a group of grandparents, like over 100 grandparents, who just loved hearing the value that they bring to their grandkids, and I wanted to encourage them. But you see their eyes light up. If you're a grandparent, your eyes light up when anything related to your grandchildren. So I know that's a huge part of the year, and that's something that's missing during COVID. So I would love to, that's one way I hope to share the message of my book. So yes, please connect with
Isabel.
me, however.
Hi, Isabel. It's Mark Ash with Right at Home.
Oh, hi, Mark.
And thank you for your presentation. Isabel, one of the things that I've noticed over the last, especially over Zoom over the last year and a half, is everybody in healthcare is talking about we're short-staffed and this and that and the other thing. Can you use your presentation in a school setting, like let's say a high school or vocational school setting, to talk about the value of the human connection as it relates to working in the healthcare field, to encourage more people, more young people specifically, about how a career in healthcare can lead you so many different places and open up so many avenues for you. Have you ever thought about presenting that in a school setting to draw more people into healthcare?
So yes, I think that's why often I'm like, there's so many things I want to do. So one of the things I have done is spoken to a number of like Aging 100 classes in a college setting, because I feel like in that Aging 100, which is like a very generic class, and it's not something where somebody has chosen the major to study aging services, I feel like that's a great place. I want to get this into like curriculum for that Aging 100 class, because the way that I write the book is really just through story. it's not written like as a message from your mom, like you need to value the older generation. It's like, this is my experience. And I think it brings light to that. So that is definitely something that I think is so important. I'm trying to have the opportunity to share my story with senior care organizations too, because I think sometimes what happens is there are tons of people who have gotten a job, maybe in high school, just to get a job at the reception, like as a receptionist or in the dining room. And I looked back on my professional career and see the reason why I stayed is because I had a mentor who told me what was going on and encouraged me in that way and helped me to see my impact. So like, I want to use that framework to be able to help senior care organizations retain those younger employees, because I think it is a struggle for employers, because sometimes they might not see as much value from having a younger person who may not be as interested. The people who stay are usually the ones who have a very close relationship with their grandparents. But I think that would help if, as you explain to these younger employees, like, hey, I would love to explain to you what's going on. In working in the hospice care field, like the people that I hired underneath me when I was working at Montgomery Hospice, they were all younger. And one of the things that I think was helpful is that I explained to them what we were dealing with. This is not just a job about hospice. I told them, like trying to connect it to everyday life is really important, because otherwise it is just, it doesn't connect, and it's not what your peers are talking about. So I think that makes it more meaningful. So if you have any contacts with professors, that's something that I started out doing in the beginning, but it takes time to develop a relationship. So yeah.
I appreciate that, and I'd love to work with you on that. My information is in the chat. I'm driving right now,
Oh, sure.
I appreciate your response. Thank you, and I'll mute again.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, please connect. I would say if you want to connect with me, sign up for my email newsletter. And that way, every time I send something out, you can reply and say, Isabel, would you like to do this? Or I thought this was great. And I love hearing from people, especially who work in the field. So you can do that by going to isabeltom.com. My podcast, I try to put it out weekly. And that's actually a way, if you have clients that you work with who just love to chat and share their story, every other week I try to share someone else's voice. And especially I want to be able to share the voice of older adults, because that's the whole purpose of it. I have a professor who was so dearly loved, but he's retired and he has Parkinson's, his wife has a Parkinson's, and he wrote a book. But I realized that he was not confident about sharing his story. Like, I think, so I was telling him, I said, like, I want to feature you on my podcast because I want people to hear what Parkinson's is like. I want them to learn from your experiences. And I could tell there was just kind of this, he graduated from Oxford. He is brilliant, but I think sometimes as I can see that like maybe lack of confidence in maybe sometimes not understanding technology, and then also with aging, just that decline that is hard. So, so my email is isabelctom@gmail.com. I mean, if you have like a list of people who came today, I can send an email out to everybody just so that I can connect with you. Or you can sign up for my email newsletter at the bottom of the page, however you want to do it. I'm good with that. Oh, and I'll share.
Isabel, we do have a question.
Sure.
Somebody brought up, just a minute, I got to scroll up a little bit.
Oh. It was about
do you have any insight on widows? My father recently passed away and I'm struggling on how to help my mother. And this is from
Lori.
Lori.
So,
I apologize. I'm having trouble scrolling right
that's
now.
fine. I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert in all these things. I've never been an administrator a CEO. I literally was a grandchild, and just like the little itty bitty people, senior care organization. And I've just done a lot of observing. My mom's a widow now. My grandma was a widow. My mother-in-law is a widow. We don't have any grandfathers left in our family. And I mean, I think it's painful to watch because you can see how hard it is, especially if they had a very close relationship with their spouse. All I can say is just like listening to them, being patient with them. There's so many different emotions, and working in hospice care, you learn about grief. There is anger, there are all different things, you know, anger, sadness, all different things that can happen. I had the experience of like one of the widows in our family experienced complete amnesia that their spouse passed away. There's just so much in that. So I think just being a listening ear, just being a presence, you know, like being there, because grief is not something you can solve by saying like, just go outside and take a walk. You know, I think we just need to have a lot of gentleness and patience. Like I, even coming today, like I had to take a walk before I came because I'm a mom and I'm usually running around with my kids. But then when I stop, I have experienced a lot of loss, and that's hard, right? So it takes energy to do that, and it is heavy to realize that somebody has passed and is no longer with you. So every day is a reminder. There's so many. I guess I'll just share this tip. The thing that I learned is really helpful in working in hospice care is that those firsts are so important. That first year, especially, you have a lot of firsts. For me, my dad was a pastor, and it was really hard going back to church, the church that he was a pastor of. That first time back at church was a trigger. The first time I went to a wedding was 2 years after he passed. First time I went to a wedding and my dad walked me down the aisle. So that's a trigger, you know, but as a spouse, you have that over and over and over again. You go to sleep, they're not there. So just to be aware of those things, I think helps us to be a lot more understanding of what they're going through.
You know,
Isabel, we need,
Isabel,
can this be a last question because we need to go through our rounds of
Sure, yeah.
introductions?
Absolutely.
Mark, go ahead.
you just brought up a great point. So in 2003, I lost two groups.
So I think you're going in and out. I can't hear you completely.
Yeah,
But I would be happy to, you know, please email me and connect with me, and you can.
what is the email address? I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's isabelctom@gmail.com. And then
Isabel C as in carrot?
I'll put it down. That way you don't have
Okay.
to do any work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Wow. This has been wonderful, very unique. And I think we've all gotten a lot of not only educational value, but emotional value out of this talk. I know I had a few tears in my eyes as I thought back on my family and my, you know, all my great grandparents. So thank you very much. We do need to go around. I will start. I will give, say 2 names at a time, and then we'll go from there. Ashok, let's start with you. And then Michael Yablonsky, you'll be next. 1 minute.
Good morning, Ashok Kapoor from Haka Medical. We had a medical equipment supply company delivering everything from breast pumps to knee braces to hospital beds, adult diapers. We take all insurances and deliver to people's homes at no charge. I also started another company. We have a telemedicine platform where we connect patients to their own healthcare providers. That's the platform that we have, and you can actually use that to manage your chronic conditions. And I thank you for Isabel for giving this talk and writing a book. I think it's very valuable for anybody.
Michael Yablon.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks, Isabel, for your information. I was a benefit of living in a multi-generation household growing up there. During COVID, and I deal a lot with older adults and seniors in our community, I found that there was a lot of loneliness, anger, and frustration with seniors because the government forgot about them. 15% of the population is either not connected to the internet or have less skills than both you and I do. Even in Zoom conferences, that I found a lot of them don't even know how to share a screen. So I have been advocating for them for the past year and a half and gathering information and resources to share with seniors who are not connected, and also have started teaching classes, teaching seniors how to improve on the internet, on their computers, even smartphones. And my wife and I have started a series of classes. The information is in the chat. If you know any seniors who might be able to benefit from that, please share that with them. And it was a real joy for me last week teaching an 84-year-old woman.
Michael, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank
1
you.
minute. Richard and then Jim McAfee.
Yes, good morning. Rich Godfrey, CPA. I can really feel for the story as last year my final parent, my mom, passed away. So I understand about all of those caregiving duties that need to be done as someone's health moves on. But one of the things that, as parents move on, from my perspective, is the trying to wrapping up the affairs, which can be very intense among family members, not just from a tax side of final 1040s or estate returns, but just the wrapping up of the parents, selling of either their condo or their house or their furniture or their plates, their car, and all of that goes on. So anyway, Rich Godfrey, CPA.
Okay, thank you very much. Next. Emily Paxton, Duncan, and then Andrew Fernbach. Emily, are you there? Okay, we'll go on. Andrew? Can't hear you. Are you?
Muted.
Andrew, you're muted, even though it's
Yeah,
something wrong.
Your lips are moving, but the sound isn't coming through.
How about now?
There we go.
Much better.
Andrew McCarthy impression to start spring it all on you. So. Yeah, my company is a senior entertainment, and I provide a live game show entertainment to assisted livings and independent senior living communities. And I do a version of the old CBS classic What's My Line panel show I call My Game, It's Your Business. It's where the residents are the participants. So it brings back a lot of fun and a lot of nostalgia. And like yours, Isabel, it brings back a lot of great stories. And with mine, you learn what everybody did for their first job. So I can relate to you, Isabel.
Andy, did you know that Jackie Mason just died at the age of 93?
Yeah.
I bet
Yeah.
So there's probably a bunch of people who don't know who Jackie Mason was.
Yeah. He talked like this, long sentences.
And he never had cheat
short.
sheets.
I thought he'd be taller.
Yeah.
And he learned that he had to be careful which finger he pointed at somebody.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
On the Ed Sullivan Show. Yeah.
Pamela Mills and then Jen Maddox.
Hi, I'm Pamela Mills, and I'm a dementia specialist, and I work as a dementia specialist, educator, and care manager. I actually work with two care management firms, both the Option Group and Corwood Care. But overall, I work as a dementia specialist. So if you have any questions about dementia, please reach out to me. If you have any clients that are living with cognitive change and would like some support or assistance, you can reach out to me. Also, just general questions as well, or if you're just a fun person and you want to say hi. So you can reach me at pmills@theoptiongroup.net, and I have my information in the chat. I also have 2 certified dementia practitioner classes coming up in August. If you are interested in becoming a certified dementia practitioner.
Okay, thank you. Jen, you're on.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to start off and say I'm so sorry I was late due to a prior commitment, but I'm glad I got on now and got to see everyone. But I'm with Puffenbarger Insurance. We do personal and business insurance, but we also insure senior homes and communities. So, and before I got into the insurance industry, I was also with a senior dermatology group for communities for quite a while. So I have a lot of investment into the seniors and making sure that they're taken well care of. So if anyone needs anything, please feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you. Patty Ross and then Lisa Davis. Patty, you there? Okay, let's go on to Lisa. We'll come back to Patty. You're muted, Lisa. It's at the bottom.